So, haben alle wieder zurückgefunden, das ist schön. Dann würde jetzt der nächste Talk gehalten vom Benedikt und er würde uns etwas darüber berichten, was im Bereich der Kryptologie A in der Theorie nicht tut, B in der Theorie tun sollte und in der Praxis nicht geht und C, was so Dinge sind, die einfach gar nicht gehen. Ja. Viel Spaß, danke, dass du hier bist und das machst und ansonsten denkt dran, ja, ruhig sein und es wäre schön, wenn zumindest die jetzt nur so diese 3 Plätze haben, vielleicht ein Stück in die Mitte rücken. A, seht ihr mehr und B, können sich dann noch Leute dazusetzen, die vielleicht 2 Minuten später kommen.
Okay. First off, yes, I do speak German, but I also speak English. And because I've already done this in German, I decided might as well have it in English so I can put it on my new video blog eventually. If you have questions, feel free to ask in German or English. You might even try French, but good luck. Okay, so what I want to talk about is the limits of cryptography. Now, I don't know very much about cryptography actually, because first about myself, so you know about the idiot here talking to you. I've got a degree in computer science from Universität Dortmund, long time ago, when the internet was still some sort of rather absurd stuff because everybody else was doing OSI. Started seriously to get the internet up and running for myself and other people in '93. My main work focus, aside from theoretical computer science at university, was always or largely TCP/IP, Unix, internet, security, but all sorts of things you would never learn at university even if you wanted, so I had to learn that myself. I've been working for about 10, 11 years now as a freelance trainer and consultant, mostly on IPv6, but I'm not going to talk about IPv6 today for a change. Yeah, written a book about IPv6 a long time ago, studied for the BSE some time ago. But now got my own company, so I'm my own boss. Terrible situation, you never get away from your boss, really. And last year I started a video blog, which is in English, like this talk today. Got 22 episodes so far, number 23 is in the make, mostly on IPv6, but not everything. And this presentation is about 1.5 years old, so it's like 9 months before Edward Snowden. I thought about putting some of the more recent developments in here and realized that it actually distracts from the important things. You're all familiar, I hope, with what has happened in the last, year or so. You'll probably see some connections there, but I want to dig deeper and take a close look at the actual reasons behind things. And it frequently helps to take a look at things that were a bit longer ago, because you have, well, kind of more emotional distance, if you like. Okay, part number 1, what's cryptography? I guess I can keep this really short, except for a few things that might be a bit of a surprise for quite a few of you. We just have to get through this. First of all, my understanding of security or IT security. Number 1, when people talk about IT security, most of the time they're lying. Why is that? Because they're not talking about IT security, but about somehow messing around with assorted insecurities which never should have happened. And IT security as its own topic in its own right should actually be about how to prevent that these things ever actually hit you. And a lot of people don't care about that. We have the entire IT security industry is about keeping the security levels low, so you have to buy their stuff to somehow stay alive anyway. Second thing is, I think that one of the key aspects of security is actually reliability. I've done a couple of trainings with people who are running call centers or the networks for call centers, but not any call centers, call centers with a local extension like 110, 112, or for those who live in wrong parts of the world, 911. And when those people actually tell you, you know, if we don't receive that phone call right away, we'll send a body back as well. And they mean it. So it's simply not an option to say security is that everything that I allow, or only the things that I allow actually work, but there are things that actually have to work at any price. And it doesn't have to do necessarily with emergency phone calls. My very first job after I graduated, I had the situation, I left there within, 2 months or so, because I decided that can't possibly work out in the long run. They had some sort of, kind of a web shop, let's say, sort of, running a prehistoric Apache version. And I told the boss there, okay, we have a problem, because if there's any security issue with this, we won't get an update, we won't get any security fixes. This is simply not available, we have to upgrade it. Yeah, we can't, because with some funny application we've added to it, we would have to update that too, and we've got better things to do. So I was sitting there with a ancient Apache web server with some sort of application which was making quite a bit of the money for the company. And about 2 weeks later, I got an email on a mailing list concerning some new security holes and some old Apache versions. When the boss said, okay, now we have a problem. What should we do? Should we turn it off and fix things, which will take days and weeks, because we haven't done this before? Or should we keep it running and risk that, well, we get into all sorts of trouble? And obviously the answer was, don't shut it down, but make sure nothing happens. Told you I wasn't staying there for long. So we do have these problems in a lot of cases. And still, when we talk about IT security, very few people actually consider reliability an issue for security. So far, I've never seen a company which had an IT security team also care of high availability clusters or such. But if you think about it, that's the way it should be. Okay, so that's point number 2. Point number 3, security is about money. It's not about, or it's largely about money. It's partly a technical topic, but it's a lot of times about money. As I said, couldn't turn off the stupid web shop, but I was responsible for making sure nothing happens there. Okay, bad story, I need something better to drink than tea, if I continue on that. That's my personal fundamental attitude when it comes to IT security. And now to crypto. When we talk about crypto, we have a couple different functionalities we use. First one is encryption. So basically, you know, Alice sends Bob some sort of message and Eve can't actually read it. You know, these old story example sort of things. We have authentication. So Bob can actually tell that the email was from Alice and not from Eve. And then there's random number generation, which doesn't fit this story thing, but it's necessary because we need random keys, initialization vectors, and whatnot. And actually, random number generation is quite interesting. I've been playing around with that for some time, a couple months or so. Maybe next year I have some funny stuff to tell about that as well. Okay, these are the 3 classic features in cryptography. We've got a couple secondary things. Steganography, basically hiding information in plain sight, making information invisible if you don't know where to look for things. We have non-repudiation. So if I send something and I can sort of, well, sign it, and to ensure that I can't later say, you know, that wasn't me, must have been somebody else, to prevent that. And something which is a bit technical is prevention of replay attacks. So basically, Alice sends Bob a message, Eve intercepts it and leaves it there, and at some later point actually forwards it to Bob, and Bob thinks it's a current message. This sort of stuff. these are generally not considered core features, but they are pretty important anyway. And then, of course, we have the criminal ones or terrorist ones. Oh. We put that on the web. Now I'll have the NSA after me got say terrorist. Okay, too late. It's anonymization or prevention of tracking. So that's what people use Tor for example. And defense against traffic flow analysis. So Alice sends Bob a message, which is encrypted and authenticated, so Bob knows it's from Alice. And Eve sees there is a message. I don't know what's in there, but that bitch is screwing with Bob again. Want to prevent that as well, possibly. So that's what we are basically talking about. And these are mostly the building blocks for everything else we do with crypto. Keys. I suppose you're all pretty familiar with this, but we just need to get this, bring it back to mind before we get to the exciting stuff. We have basically three different types of keys. We've got secret or symmetric keys, which is both sides in the communication have the same key, which is fast and well, what we generally use for the bulk of data we encrypt and authenticate in another way. We have public-private key pairs, which are only used to exchange random, there we need the random number generator, random symmetric keys normally in a hybrid setup. And then we have certificates and certificate chains like we use with SSL and that sort of stuff to actually allow some intermediate to authenticate others in a larger setup. The different ways to distribute keys, we have secure channels. Basically, you know these PGP paper strip things people used a lot some time ago, where you just pass a key through an independent channel and hope it's secure, or like sending people SMSs and think that's safe. But let's not get into that at this point. We have key brokers like Kerberos or Active Directory, which is Microsoft Kerberos, really. We have decentralized trust chains like we use with PGP. And we have centralized or hierarchical certificate chains like we use with SSL certificates, X509 certificates, where we have a couple certificate authorities and they sort of, well, certify that certain keys belong to certain people. At least that's what you pay them money for. Another problem we have when it comes to keys, which is also quite important, is key invalidation or key revocation. So if a key gets compromised, we can actually make sure it won't be used any longer. And that works in theory. I'll have stories about that, believe me. Okay, one more problem which I became seriously aware of in connection with IPv6 actually. All the standard scenarios generally assume that we have either one person encrypting, for example, a hard disk, and accessing it again at a later time, or one person, or one principal, that's really Kerberos term, sending data to somebody else, and make sure that only they can decrypt them and authenticate them and so on. Situation gets really ugly if there's more than two. Why is that? Well, there's a saying, two people can keep a secret, but if three people know, all town does. And why is that so? As long as two people know about some secret key or whatever, one passes it on, the other one knows who it was, whose fault it was. So that works. If there are three, and you know one of the other two passed the data on or the key on or whatever, you don't know which one it was. And that's when things get really ugly. Multicast with IPv6 is rather interesting, rather popular, but if you want to protect it using crypto, it's pretty much impossible. You'd have to use public key crypto for every single packet, which is performance-wise a complete disaster. And that means you have some rather nasty implications that might actually surprise you if you don't read the fine print. Okay, what sort of attack types do we have to deal with? And what can we protect against? Crypto protects against passive listening and reading the encrypted data being communicated. It can protect against active manipulation of data by making sure that, well, an attacker can manipulate things and it'll be garbage once you try to decrypt. And that means you can detect, okay, something has gone wrong here. Crypto can prevent a targeted modification, so changing what? Dates, and first there's a message sent, attack at dawn, and somebody in the middle subverts it into attack at dusk, and that sort of stuff. That's what crypto seriously protects. It partially protects against traffic flow analysis. Partially because you can still see the traffic there. You can try to do funny things like padding data and so on, but it doesn't really work all that well in practice. So basically, if you want to make sure that somebody can't see that you're sending data, you have to send garbage all the time, and then eventually sneak the data you want to transport in between the garbage. And from an attacker's point of view, it all looks like garbage anyway, so they don't know what's going on. Replay attacks, you can protect against these if you have a bidirectional communication, or if you rely on clock synchronization, but then you have a more or less large time frame where you actually are vulnerable. So it's only partially protected against. Crypto doesn't protect against destruction of data or suppression of communications. Now, I've got a special cable for that I forgot to bring, which is an adapter RJ45 to mains. No amount of crypto can protect against that, not really. And yes, Ethernet should be able to cope with that, but those cards that might actually have network cards that might actually have a chance, I wouldn't want to pay for them if they don't. And crypto actually backfires. It's counterproductive in certain respects. First of all, it's a pain to set up and run and maintain, so it will lower your reliability. It's just another thing that can actually break. And if you've ever tried to use IPsec, you know it does break. It also makes it much easier to do denial of service attacks. Now, long time ago, different job, I was dealing with a slightly larger web server, one of the top 10 at that time in the world. And we had a couple systems. We've had these big web servers, we had a couple other projects, and it's much easier to bring down an HTTPS server by just connecting, sending some garbage, closing the connection, because the SSL server will try to do crypto on the garbage. And it's easy to generate garbage, but difficult to try to decrypt it. Then just attacking a plain HTTP server, where you send garbage and the web server says, okay, this is garbage, forget about it. That's quite a serious issue. And of course, last thing is, the bad guys also use crypto for whatever definition of bad guy you prefer, right? So there was Crypto 101 in, what, a couple minutes. What inherent limits do we have with crypto algorithms at the algorithmic level? That's fairly simple, actually. You can prove that a crypto system is weaker than you always thought. And we've had lots of examples for that. But so far, I have never seen or heard of a crypto system that was known to be weak to be eventually proven to be much stronger than ever we thought. You can only prove that it doesn't work as you expected. Nothing better. What we'd really like was something else. And yes, this also applies to one-time pads, because this mathematical proof that one-time pads are secure is not actually a mathematical proof that one-time pads are secure. It says your one-time pad is secure as your random number generator. And how do we get a secure random number generator? Aside from the fact that I'm playing around with these things right now, you don't. You take a look at any statistics book and it talks about Kolmogorov and whatever, and all statistics is based on an axiomatic assumption that there is such a thing as randomness. There is no proof for that. And there's definitely no proof that random number generator that's built into your computer is actually a random number generator. So even this is not a provably secure system. Another problem is we always have to exchange some sort of key material before we actually get started. When you talk about public key, you have those root certificates in your web browsers or wherever. Without those, you don't get any proper cryptographic protection. When we talk of software, software is deterministic, well, at least in theory. Let's not talk about race conditions and that sort of stuff. So software is deterministic, so any random number generator that's actually done in software isn't. I mean, it's done in software, but it's not a random number generator. It's a pseudo-random number generator, and they are only as secure, or as hopefully secure, as the algorithms are that have been used. That's quite a problem. And one more thing, no matter how much crypto you use, you can't protect physical tampering with your end device. It's actually something else I'm kind of playing around with, so maybe next year I have some more to tell you about that. But right now, assume if you have a computer and somebody else gets access to it, you have a problem. No way around it. And okay, I'm not gonna ask if any of you actually take your computers to bed with you, because somebody might answer yes, but there is a fairly realistic risk in there that we simply frequently ignore because there's no proper solution to it. Okay, now there's a very fundamental methodological approach to these things. If you want to know where we are going to be in 10 or 15 years from now, what you can do, and that works reasonably well in a lot of areas, is to look back where have we been 10 or 15 years ago. And if you decide, okay, oh my God, this can't be serious, this is complete nuts, you can be pretty sure 10 to 15 years from now you'll think the same about what we're doing right now. 15 years ago, Stadtsparkasse Dortmund offered online banking, one of the first Sparkasse who did that, and using HTTP, no S. Seriously. It was safe, provably safe, because somebody had, they actually printed out whatever things and had somebody type things into their backend systems. So it was known to be safe. Crazy, really. 10 years ago, we still used the ES40, which you can hack with a reasonably powerful pocket calculator. Digital watch, if you know what you're doing. We used that for online banking, simply because we didn't have anything else. With the US ITAR regulations, ITAR is International Trade in Arms and Ammunition Regulation, basically dealing with ABC weapons and export to the rest of the world, ABC weapons being atomic, biological, and crypto. And we didn't have anything else, so we used it. And you can be sure 10 or 15 years from now, we were sitting there, oh my God. Okay, now one thing about the latest things that got, pardon me? You're about 10 to 15 years ahead of time. If you think about the situation we have right now, we are using pseudo-random number generators, which have been pretty much known to be hacked by the NSA through the NIST standardization. And we are still actually using them because we don't even know where we are. We have them all of our places, and we'd have to replace them. That's a practical issue later on. And we're using AES, which is an encryption standard. We don't know any significant indications that these are insecure, so we continue to use them, despite the fact that the NSA sponsored this competition that actually elected this particular algorithm for, well, pretty much international at that point, encryption standard. That's crazy. I mean, how can we trust these people? I mean, really? And still we're using this stuff because we don't have that many alternatives. Well, we have on systems that we control ourselves, but if we have to do online banking and our bank only offers AES, we'll use it. So that's a problem we have. Next thing, and that's at the algorithmic level or very, very high level, performance. Crypto needs performance. It needs energy, it needs chip space, computational power, and it needs time. Now, when the ITF got serious about IPv6, they had a long discussion, I wish I'd been there, I would have loved to see that, about putting strong encryption into IPv6 as a standard. So making it mandatory to have crypto capabilities. You don't have to turn it on, but it has to be there if you implement it. Must have been a tremendous discussion because the ITF is trying to stay out of political discussions best they can, and now saying, okay, crypto is a mandatory component of IPv6. Now that is a political statement. Saying it isn't is also a political statement, and saying, okay, we just keep going what we're doing anyway is not an option anymore. So they had a huge struggle and eventually decided, yes, we will make IPv6 a mandatory component of all RFC compliant IPv6 implementations. And they actually rescinded that because people building the Internet of Things, embedded devices, appliances, low power microcontroller sort of things, they said, we can't possibly implement this compliant to the RFCs because crypto is simply impossible to implement in a battery-powered or solar-powered or whatever powered device because it draws too much power. Right? They're light switches which are wireless, and they don't even have a battery because you press them and they've got one of those piezo generators in there, which gives them enough power to send out signal to whatever your lamps to turn on and off. If you try to do that with crypto, you're probably standing there to turn the light on, because crypto needs power, right? And what that eventually leads to is that we do things in a way that we might just barely get away with right now, but which is gonna give us some real trouble in the not too far future. We've seen DES 40 mentioned already, DES, then triple DES, which was already pretty much a border case thing when they came up with. And what's really scary, GSM, GPRS. I'll have a bit more about that later on. GSM, GPRS use some sort of encryption, if they actually do that, which was pretty weak by the time they designed it, and the situation hasn't gotten any better since. Another point is, when we talk about these performance things, and computers getting still more performant every year, we actually have to make sure that every once in a while we replace the cryptographic systems we use. Now when we talk full-blown computers, that's manageable. When we talk about embedded systems, things done in hardware, That actually means we have to replace our light switches. It also means that in the long run, whatever data we encrypt, it will only stay protected for some certain amount of time, or some uncertain amount of time, but definitely a finite amount of time. Simply because we can't ensure that whatever cryptographic means we use today are still secure years, decades from now. Simply doesn't work. And yes, I know perfect forward security, which is the biggest problem I have with it, that talking about perfect in crypto is simply stupid. It doesn't work. And it insinuates a level of protection that's not actually there. Eventually, there is a good chance that people will actually decrypt the symmetric cipher used there and break your stuff no matter what you've done, what else you've done. So that's important. And of course, yes, once you start with crypto, you want to be very careful when it comes to denial of service. Okay, screwed up algorithms. Now we slowly get into the fun part. MS CHAP. Now CHAP is pretty astonishing. Challenge response handshake authentication protocol, and Microsoft did their own version. Guess what? You can look things up in Wikipedia even if you want the details. They seriously screwed up, and the scary thing is people continue to use this stuff. Wired equivalent privacy, another one of those big names for a lot of garbage. You look that up in Wikipedia and you just look for something to drink. And these are pretty well known. There's another one reasonably known here in Germany, was in 2006. Felix Lindner accidentally discovered that his online banking 10 lists looked sort of funny. I mean, with bare eyes, kind of. And turned out that these random PIN or 10 numbers were not quite as random as you might expect, because somebody didn't understand what random number generation means. More examples to follow, but this goes into real world implementations because that's where things get really entertaining. First of all, even reasonably sound algorithms routinely get so disastrously bad implemented that it's difficult to believe that this was actually incompetence. It happens all the time. Admittedly, implementing crypto properly is not easy. There are attacks against implementations which don't actually touch the algorithms. For example, what you can do is you can do timing analysis. How long does it take for some next couple bytes or whatever to show up? Power consumption. You can, especially on hardware devices, especially on small devices, you can just measure power consumption with an oscilloscope or whatever and make a reasonably close guess at whatever keys are used. We've had, and especially virtual machines are susceptible to that. When you use virtual machines, the number of memory cache pages used by another virtual machine, or the amount of memory or disk access patterns and whatnot, you can actually monitor from another virtual machine. So running your SSL, which is a great topic by itself anyway, your SSL protected web shop on a virtual machine at a hoster might actually be less secure than you might think, because somebody using a different virtual machine on the same host might be able to measure things one way or another. The best hope there is that there are easier ways to make money for those guys. Another thing that happened, and I haven't found something to quote on this, but I do remember discussion on some sort of crypto hardware thing where some researchers actually found out you can extract the key using differential analysis, using basically X-rays, hard X-ray radiation to flip individual bits in the embedded key and then recover it. And answer from the vendor was, yeah, but who has access to X-rays? Unless you work for a dentist or an airport security or I don't know. And then the same researchers tried to use something like 300 megahertz input signal on the power supply inputs, and they got the same result. And 300 megahertz generator is not that difficult to build. It takes about 2 transistors, 2 capacitors, and 4 resistors or so. And you can attack things through a side channel by not attacking the actual algorithm, but the implementation. And these implementations run on various devices, possibly involving an operating system, and even applications like web browsers and that sort of stuff. And they all can be attacked to circumvent the possibly, at that point in time, unbreakable algorithm. Now, hardware implementations. I'm currently playing around with this. It's really amazing about the various things that are done there and are not done there. First problem is it's pretty much impossible to validate crypto hardware implementation. Pretty much anything you can buy today, like your TPM module on your PC, or whatever Intel puts or claims to have put into your CPU, you can't really test it. You just have to blindly trust them that they're putting in there what you expect. It's pretty much impossible to discover backdoors. Very, very difficult if you don't know what to look for. And if you are really serious about testing that, you basically have 2 problems. Number one is you need some rather fancy equipment, depending on the sort of stuff you want to take a look at. And the end result frequently is, okay, this thing was clean, and now it's finished. So what you can do is only just take a box of CPUs and okay, I take this one and this one and this one, and now we take a look at these and hope that the rest is just the same. Sorry? Sorry? Okay. Another problem we have is, or basically that means if I have an individually manipulated microphone, I have very, very little options or very little chance to figure out that there's something wrong. And afterwards, Angela needs a new phone. Another problem is how do I do a security update on these things? And that can actually be quite a problem. So you buy stuff, especially this Internet of Things, blah, 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 lots of small devices, like wristwatches, hypothetically, and things, and you want to do a security update in hardware. Means you have to replace things. It's completely, it's impractical. It's effectively impossible. And even if you could do a security update in your, well, in my case, dumb phone. This one's really dumb. This is a good one. Even if you want, if they are capable of doing security updates, this capability in itself is a security issue because somebody might actually insert some stuff there that you wouldn't want there. And as soon as you have to replace hardware, yeah, it takes time and money, and it's a huge problem. When it comes to software, okay, I already mentioned the performance impact. I've already mentioned The problems with regard to pseudo-random number generators, there's also a problem if we talk a standard software solution in a computer. You can't protect the key material in there. Not really, really. You can try a number of things, but generally protection is very difficult. More examples later on. So what about the computers or the hardware itself? We can try to attack the actual hardware. Take some tiny little needle and connect a crocodile clamp and then put some funny stuff in there, whatever. And when it comes to standard hardware like PCs, tablets, smartphones, whatever you want, they haven't been even remotely designed, generally speaking, with physical security in mind. You can get keyloggers legally for around about 25 or 30 euros. Been some sources out there on Heiser years ago. You can actually buy them. It's not legal to buy. And if you think about that, and the standard SD card goes up to 128 gigabytes worth of data. That's a hell of a lot of typing to record before they run out of memory. We have things like Thunderbolt and before Firewire, which are externally accessible connectors, and they do DMA, which means you can connect something in there that reads out your entire memory content without any particular tricks. And even if you have a notebook without Thunderbolt or Firewire or such, the standard procedure in computer forensics is to keep the machine running, open it up as far as you can get, put some freeze spray in there, pull out the memory, put it into suitable equipment and read out the memory content. Because if you freeze things low enough, you can actually preserve the memory content for long enough to transfer the memory from one machine to another. And it doesn't take liquid hydrogen or anything like that for the job. It just, all it takes is standard freeze spray. So, operating systems. Yeah. Now I suppose you all use secure operating systems, if they exist. But generally speaking, today it's generally considered more secure to do security updates once per month, because otherwise people will just miss updates anyway. It says a bit of things about the state of IT security, and why I put it in quotation marks, I guess. As long as we have so many security fixes every month that people can't actually install fixes individually, we shouldn't talk about iSecurity at all. It's just insecurity management, and a bad kind of management by that. We also do automatic updates because it's the most reliable way to do, no matter about the side effects. So I guess if you're using virus scanners, or if you read Heiser or whatever, you know, every once in a while a virus scanner update decides, okay, this part of our operating system is obviously a virus, and disables it, and you can't work. Now, that's not the way it should be, but that's where we're currently standing. And we haven't really got a way to deal with these things in a way that actually should be considered acceptable in the vast majority of devices we use. And with smartphones and apps on the smartphones and whatever, we just start the game all over again. And applications? Yeah, our new web browser is absolutely secure. It's using OpenSSL. Okay, if it wasn't a web browser, but some stupid, I don't know, zip phone or network printer or whatever, and it wasn't OpenSSL but strong crypto, AES 256, something like that, people would actually be impressed. Maybe not you, but a lot of others. And we have applications, we have things like web browsers, we've got Flash, and also things, and if we wanted these things to be actually safe, they should be, you're gonna laugh, and that's not what I mean, but they should be implemented with the same level of security consciousness as the SSL library they use. But anyway, we should implement everything like we implement security components. And I don't know if you know any real-world programmers, but I've seen a few, and I don't know why I don't want to do programming. Another problem is that as soon as crypto enters the game, handling gets a bit more complicated for end users, especially for end users who don't really understand what they are doing there. And frequently, once you enter performance, or once you start to use crypto, people will perceive performance to go down. And when we talk about things like Tor, it actually does go down to a point that a lot of people will simply decide, I can't possibly use this. And that leads to all sorts of fun problems in a moment when it comes to layer 8 problems. Hang on. Yeah. Okay, SSL. These are old stories. I'm not going to talk about the Heartbleed because, no, I'm not, because it's very, very easy to say, okay, somebody there screwed up, and the immediate problem or the immediately responsible person or whatever is fairly obvious. But the problem with the SSL is much deeper. And if we talk about the latest events, there's a good chance you'll never actually get to the point that you get to the root problem. A couple of years ago, September 2006, Debian introduced little optimization to OpenSSL, which led to an insecure key generator. And it took them about 2 years to realize that there was something really, really, really wrong. What they did, when they found the problem, they made sure they fixed it as quickly as possible, came up with some tools to see which keys were affected and whatnot, but it took them 2 years to figure out. And of course it was the NSA. I mean, no open source developer would make that sort of stupid mistake, right? So it must have been the NSA. Whatever, doesn't matter. We had a serious problem there. Good thing is the way people handled this. Slightly less professional was the first VeriSign incident, where VeriSign issued 2 certificates to Microsoft, which could be used for signing ActiveX controls. Only they didn't issue them to Microsoft, but to somebody else. And they have been used for attacks, and then things got really ugly. Why? Now SSL, TLS, whatever, there is a mechanism to revoke compromised keys. Only VeriSign didn't implement them. There were actually 2. There are standard CRLs, certificate revocation lists, which you periodically poll and then eventually delete or disable compromised keys, but it takes time. And then there's the online certificate status protocol, where you do this immediately, but that slows things down again, and we want people to be happy because things are fast. So nobody used either one. And eventually, how was this problem solved? Not by VeriSign installing CRLs and Microsoft enabling them in their web browser, but by Microsoft issuing a security patch which hard-codedly disabled these 2 keys. So much about clutching up security issues. It's unbelievable that they did it like that, but that's what happened. So, that was algorithms, that was implementations, and now to the real problems. Layer 8, people in front of the screen. Normal users. Well, they don't understand what's going on anyway. Yeah, you just have to click there, and then something there happens, and that's what you want. That's the sort of level they operate at. Once you tell them, okay, you have crypto here, it's secure, there's a good chance they believe you. If the URL line in your web browser is what, blue or green or whatever, it means it's extra secure. That's all they are being told, and that's all they probably believe. So they say, okay, secure is no longer my problem. It's somebody else's problem. They've taken care of it. They are the professionals anyway. And another problem I've had repeatedly, and I don't know, how many of you do actually work in system administration one way or another? How many of you have to deal with software developers? How many of you have ever received an email, please put this SSH key on that machine so I can work on it, and it contained a private key? Well, okay. And how many of you checked if there actually was a passphrase on that key and didn't find any? That's what happens. And I mean, these are even software developers. They're supposed to be able to read documentation. They're actually supposed to write documentation, but I've had that in about, I've been dealing with these people, external software developers, for about a year or so, and we've had 7 or 8 of these things happen. And a huge fuss when we just removed the keys everywhere and said, okay, you need somebody to tell you what to do and not to do. And I've had more than one tell me, I'm not going to use a passphrase, I have better things to do than typing the passphrase all the time. And security was my problem, so he didn't care, right? And another problem is that a lot of people are completely at the mercy of their sysadmins. I mean, if I'm system administrator of somebody else's computer, I can do anything and make it look like their fault. So this is really scary, and people just decide, okay, that's the way it is, there's nothing I can do about it, and I'll just live on and pretend that there's nothing there. That's what people normally do. Yeah. Fuck-ups. A fuck-up is a fault unnecessarily caused by unwarranted presumptuousness. Basically goes back to a time when I was dealing with these external coding heroes, and every time we found a bug in their system or in their stuff, they wanted a SIR, a system investigation request, basically a bug report. And so they had in their weekly status reports like so and so many SIRs, and it sounded like, well, yeah, okay. You took that through a text editor, replaced SIR with fuck up, read it again, and you knew what the real situation was. Words are sometimes really important. What frequently happens is that people completely underestimate the difficulties of implementing and even just using crypto properly. When it comes to self-designed crypto algorithms, it's a complete disaster. And how many of you do know Crypto Chef? Okay, there are quite a few who don't. Let me show you. Hey. Wollen wir einmal den? Okay, this is in German. You can get the same in English. He's actually managed to run it through Babelfish or something like that. Let's take a look at that, just for the fun of it. And let's see, some of the more important, some of the more exciting stuff. Uh, sorry. Can you read that? Probably not, huh? Okay, so basically he invented the one and only crypto that actually works. How it works he doesn't tell, because that's secret. But he's using 250-bit encryption, because 250 bits is the largest encryption you can actually use, because computers use bytes, and bytes have 8 bits, and so you can count from 0 to 255. But because computers work in hexadecimal, that's 256, and you can't do more with computers than that. Something like that. It's absolutely crazy, and apparently what he's doing is just an XOR with some fixed value. And you're laughing. Okay, now, hang on. Problem is, you get the same stuff sold with a slightly more professionally looking web page, and you don't necessarily notice. And I'll have a couple of examples of that. Another problem, however, let's stick with the developers first, right? The real nasty stuff comes at the end, as always. There are people who are paranoid, and there are people who are professionally paranoid, which is different. One is a medical condition, the other one is a way to make money. And there is a problem if you use crypto or whatever security mechanism, it has to actually match your requirements, your particular threat model, whatever. If you don't do that, if you just plaster your network with firewalls, it'll just backfire. Because every time you use some sort of security measure, it means it will introduce some operational restrictions. Other people are trying to use your computer networks to make money, yours as well. And basically, if you have amateurs, they every once in a while completely screw up because they don't get the balance right at all. Same can happen to IT security people who only do IT security. They're basically the sports in any major IT department in any big company, because they keep telling people, you can't possibly do that, it's insecure. And so what should we do then? Just don't do it, which is not really an answer if you try to get something done to make a living. And when that happens, that means, first of all, there'll be management decisions, which means security will be done where it's convenient, not where it's needed. And you'll have users doing funny things to get their work done, like passing passwords, SSH keys, or whatever around to their colleagues so they can actually do things. And once this is established in a company or whatever, security really goes down. Okay, so that's about layer 8. Now layer 9. Layer 9 is management. You know, the TCP/IP stack has 11 layers, right? Or the physical layer, we've got data link layer, we've got network layer, we've got transport layer, we've got, anybody knows what layer 5 in the OSI stack is? Session layer, cool. And 6 is presentation layer. Oh, I'm fascinated. Do you actually know what they are doing? Okay. Layer 7, application layer. Layer 8, users, admins, developers, people who actually touch layer 7. Layer 9, management. Layer 10, politics. Layer 11, churches. Now we're talking layer 9, management, or basically money. Pretty much the same. Okay, Stadtsparkasse Dortmund. I've already mentioned it. They screwed up. Citibank with their TAN list, and lots and lots more. Despite the fact that these are banks, and banks are fairly strictly regulated. If you think about that, you don't even want to think about what might happen at your favorite web shop. I didn't translate this because my English is reasonably good, but this is the sort of language I couldn't write in German. I couldn't even remotely translate into English. Basically, statement from Citibank was that these 10 numbers, they are random because the time at the time that the 10s were generated was used as part of the randomness for the 10s, and that explains why they are monotonically increasing. And because all these lists are generated at different times, they are unpredictable. Yeah, some more about this. Search for it at Heise and you'll get the story, and you just say, this can't be serious. I mean, this is a bank. They're supposed to have people who know about this. And I've been working with a couple or one bank at least directly, where they had security people who were just laughing their heads off about this, and then got outsourced. These things do happen. And hang on, there was another one. Yeah, Stadtsparkasse Dortmund. Yeah, they decided it's secure because we have to re-enter them into the backend systems manually. What more about SSL? Okay, I've already mentioned VeriSign Microsoft. My question is, why did they not implement certificate revocation lists? Why didn't they do that? Both of them didn't. VeriSign didn't implement the servers, and Microsoft didn't implement the client side to actually check these. Microsoft had an excuse. It takes longer for the users, so they don't want it. But VeriSign, they are being paid for providing SSL certificates, right? Comodo screwed up, only figured out a week and a half later, but at least they admit it. And 3 years ago, a Dutch certificate authority, DigiNotar, really screwed up. And I mean, really, and criminally, in my opinion. Basically what happened, they were hacked in June 10th, in 2011, discovered about, 5.5 weeks later that there was something had happened, but they didn't tell anybody. And only when fake certificates were actually used for attacks and people found out it must have been them. No other way. They actually admitted, yeah, well, sorry. A couple months ago we had a little yeah. So they've created certificates for Yahoo, Mozilla, WordPress, Tor project, and they couldn't even figure out what had happened, what certificates might have been put in the wild. Nothing. And yeah, the big problem there is that they didn't go public when they figured out what had happened. DigiNotar has been issuing certificates to lawyers, notary services, and that sort of stuff. So where there's some real trouble involved. And when things became known, guess what they did? Okay, we've got to declare something. Bankruptcy. These things happen. Other screw-ups. Crypto hard disks. Now, there are crypto hard disks with encryption in the disk, and there are tape drives with encryption in the tape drive, and all sorts of things. And again, you can't just look inside and see if they're serious most of the time. And a couple cases were so disastrous that you could actually see, or some people who took an interest could actually see. There's a chip called Inmax IM7206, which is, Inmax is a Chinese chip manufacturer. In 2008, Heise Security published an analysis of some AES 128-bit encrypting disk enclosure for rather little money. and figured out the only thing it did was to AES encrypt on your computer the 32-bit XOR key they'd use for the disk afterwards. They just XOR the data on the disk with a fixed value, which is something so ridiculous. Even the crypto chef can do that, apparently. And sometime later, the manufacturer reacted by updating the documentation. 4 years later, another disk enclosure with the same chip became available in Germany. Same problem. So this is really crazy. And I had a kind of related situation actually a long time ago. And at the time I was working in a place, we were doing some sort of housing stuff for, among other things, and we were actually doing some housing stuff for some banks doing online banking. And we had to do backup for the servers there. And our idea was to use a tape autoloader, single tape drive, 20 tapes or something like that, to back up these servers. It was a fairly small system actually. But the sales rep of our backup software vendor tried to convince our boss to buy some additional crypto feature for their backup software. And a colleague of mine and I said, this can't work. They claim to be about 10 to 20 times as fast as the fastest, I don't even remember what we're using there. Wasn't the ES56, we've been using something else at that time already. But anyway, any reasonable encryption stuff should be at least a tenth of the speed they claim. And yeah, we had lunch break. He stayed in his office. I went for the cafeteria. When we came back, he was sitting in my room and said, "You won't believe this. They are doing the same thing as the crypto chef." And that was a fairly reputable vendor. And the sales rep, when we told him, you realize this was for a bank and what you're selling there is crap. First he tried to, he came up with this reverse engineering and illegal and whatnot. At that point we decided, okay, let's tell our boss, who was a bit more experienced with this sort of stuff. Said, yeah, okay, you realize you have a problem there. Do you actually sell this stuff to other banks? Because you might want to notify them right away while we notify the BaFin. These things happen. And again, there was a rather reputable big vendor. I'm not going to give any names because it's been recorded. What happens? Another thing you see, okay, this our brand new whatever stuff, it's so secure. With all the computers in the world, it takes 500 billion years to break this code. That's what they say. What they don't say is, provided that all attackers, on all of them, are so bloody stupid that they don't have any brains, even themselves or from some books, to figure out how to do this faster. Right? These claims are just ridiculous. The bad thing is they frequently impress managers, and then we have the situation with boss, they're lying. What do you mean they're lying? Well, they're salespeople, damn it. Yeah, but are you sure? Yes. These things happen. And the only things you can do, if you're lucky, if you're in the right situation, and that frequently doesn't work, I admit that, is make sure you get clearly defined requirements on your side, what you need, what you expect, and if they agree to provide that, you might actually have a fighting chance to get them into court, provided they don't declare bankruptcy, right? Another thing that I found very helpful, and that is easy. Request technical white papers about their products. How do they work? Not the glossy stuff, but the real technical background. And if they tell you, sorry, but that's business secrets and whatever, you know what to think of it. And I'm not going to make open source or whatever a religion, but at this point, you want to know what they are doing and you want to have some decent technical background information. And there's one thing that frequently doesn't work because insurances aren't generally that stupid, but insist that these vendors have some sort of insurance if their stuff has a problem. Problem there is they probably won't get any insurance because somebody else has to sign that as well on the insurance company's side. But it sometimes helps to prevent worse things from happening if you can convince your boss, we need this. Okay. So that was layer 9. Now about people in general, lethargy or pragmatism. A couple things you want to be aware of. If there's no pain, nothing happens. People don't go to the dentist until they can't stand the pain any longer. So if you want to get things done, you have to make sure that people who are in a position to change things actually feel the pain and actually associate it with a problem. It can be tricky. It doesn't have to do with crypto. It's a general thing, but it's rather important in this sort of situation. And as long as there's no alternative, people will continue to use whatever they have. How many of you have stopped using OpenSSL? That's what I thought. Why not? Yeah. Well, there are alternatives, but not for whatever you use it with, generally. And what? Maybe yes. But even then, if you don't have any real option, you stick with whatever you have. You won't say, okay, I'm not going to do online banking anymore. Very, very few people are so aware of the situation that they actually might decide to do that. And if they do, their bosses might tell them to stop that nonsense and continue whatever. And even if there are alternatives, the pain has to be worse than the alternatives. Sometimes it actually helps to hurt people. Give them a good whack. We need to solve this thing. Okay. And even then, it's frequently too late. Things should have happened before. And the entire reason why I've done this talk is to give you a couple of ideas of what to watch out beforehand so you don't ever actually get into the situation. That's pretty much the entire idea of this. And then there's one more thing, just for the fun of it, the crypto life cycle. Basically what you do, you put some new system with crypto or whatever to production. Everything is fantastic, it all works. And then some stupid academic researchers come, we might have found a potential problem there. Yeah, you might have found a potential problem, go away. It's just a theoretical thing, so why should I care? Then theory turns into practice. Oh my God, how could that happen? But okay, so far it hasn't affected us. Good. Good, just keep going. And then of course, when things get really ugly because you get hit, how in the world could that happen? Well, we told you so. Okay, now be pragmatic for once, and we need a solution now. Right? And of course, it's the IT department's fault, right? It's their job to make sure that this doesn't happen, and blah, 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 blah. So what you do is you fix things up best you can at that point, as quickly as possible, because you're losing money, you're having trouble, whatever. So get a pragmatic solution. But we can't stop business. The web shop has to run. And make sure it doesn't happen to us again. Okay. And then you start over. That's what frequently happens. It's pretty difficult to get out of this. If you're lucky, you take a hit and your company survives and you can tell your boss, okay, now we sort this out properly. But there's a good chance that at that time you're in such a difficult economic situation that solving problems properly is not much of an option either. Okay. One more thing, once things are established, once they are out there in the wild, crypto is an infrastructure. So lots of things are built on top of it. And lots of things depend on it. And lots of people work on things that depend on it, so they want to be involved. And if you say we have to replace OpenSSL with whatever's worse, a lot of people want to have a say in there, and they have all sorts of problems with that, and it takes lots of meetings and lots of coffee, and if you're lucky, lots of cookies, and it's taking time, it's taking resources, and it's taking money. And if you're really unlucky, the end result is we can't possibly do this. We have to stick with whatever we have. And that's where things get really ugly. And if I was responsible for security, in the sense that it'll be my fault if things go wrong, but if I say we have to do differently, nobody cares, that's real serious problem. One of the really big fuck-ups in this case is GSM security. I promised you I'd show you a couple things more about this. This is all just about Wikipedia. You can actually find these things there. Basically, when they designed GSM, they had to balance power consumption with whatever you had in a cell phone with the security protections. So they came up with some encryption algorithms which were, let's say, border case. Let's be nice. And these have long since been broken. And yes, they can be broken in real time. I've never actually met him, Carsten Nohl here in Germany, who's been doing some rather interesting work on this. It basically means whatever we use in the old-fashioned GSM net or GPRS networks is as good as, or as bad as plain text. You can hack these things. I've got more details there if you want to read, but we're not too bad in time. And the last paragraph is really exciting. With regard to GPRS, they also noted that some carriers don't encrypt the data at all using whatever, in order to detect the use of traffic or protocols they don't like Skype, leaving their customers unprotected. They license phone carriers. They've got government approval that they are responsible and operators for a critical infrastructure. Crazy. What does this all mean? First of all, crypto solutions get weaker over time. Attackers have more computational power, more knowledge, more research, and so on available to break whatever encryption we use. And if you believe that something you encrypt today will still be safe 10 years from now, you're rather optimistic. Don't. It's simply very, very unlikely, because if you take a look what we've been using 10 years ago, you wouldn't consider that secure these days either. Another thing I've learned, independent of encryption or crypto or whatever, when things are really critical, go and have a plan B. Basically, come up with some sort of way to deal with a security issue on short notice in a previously planned out way. If I ever have to build a major web server farm which is sufficiently important, I'll not just use like Apache, put it on a bunch of web servers and say that's it. I'd have installation images for an alternative operating system, or alternative web server and whatever in a drawer, so I can switch to a different implementation on reasonably short notice, for example. That's if things are really, really critical. Make sure you can actually revoke compromised keys somehow. Doesn't matter exactly how you do it. You can use Puppet, you can use for H in $hosts, do SSH $H, blah, 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 blah. Whatever, your choice, but make sure you can actually handle that situation, because eventually you'll have to. And make sure even if a key gets compromised, the impact isn't all that disastrous. If everybody can do everything on your systems with whatever key they have, you probably made a mistake. And generally be aware, crypto isn't always the solution. Not in the long run. And even with these fancy schemes like digital signage, not digital signage, some different digital authentication of documents, which then after 10 years or so get re-signed with a new algorithm and whatnot. It's still going to get continuously weaker, no matter what some contractors who implement these things for the government for a lot of money claim. So good cryptocryption, yes. Don't use anything where you can't revoke the keys. I'm repeating myself, I know. Make sure you have update mechanisms, ways to install security fixes. And if that means, sorry, these electronic locks we use in buildings are not an option, then they're not an option. Find something else. If you don't find anything else, stick with regular mechanical keys. Make sure you have crypto as part of a more general security concept, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I know I sound like a preacher now, but that's really what you want to be aware of. It's not just, okay, we put crypto on there and all security problems are solved. IPv6 is secure because it has IPsec. I've actually heard that. If you don't get all these things sorted out, crypto will give you a warm fuzzy feeling in the stomach for a fairly short time only, and then things get ugly with pretty much likelihood. Okay, one more thing, legal and political aspects. Now we're talking layer 10. Okay, encryption. Are you using encryption? Aha. Come with me, sir. Sounds funny. Certain airports in certain countries, this might well happen to you. Don't have to go to the US for that. UK is enough. Maybe you will have to surrender your keys by court order, even by customs officials ordering, like if you go traveling through Heathrow or so. And same with anonymization. You use Tor, interesting. Who is responsible for anonymization? Who's responsible for illegal use? Is an exit node operator responsible for what people do through his exit node? Is he or isn't he? Ask a lawyer in whatever country you like. And the situation is ugly. Good thing is I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not going to talk about this anymore. Otherwise I run out of time. When it comes to authentication, are these cryptographically signed documents legally binding or not? If they aren't, they're useless. If they are, can I be actually forced to use it? The Personalausweis, electronic Personalausweis, stuff here in Germany. It's safe. You know why? By law. And if something happens there, you might actually find yourself in a situation that you have to prove that it wasn't you. And you have to use that thing with some sort of computer or whatever, which you don't control. I mean, seriously, who's controlling your computer? You, or Microsoft, or Apple, or Canonical, or, well, the Debian crowd, okay, you might actually have a chance there, but even they screw up, we've seen. And who has to bear the burden of proof? Who does have to prove that something happened or didn't happen with your key? And how could such a proof actually look like? And where do you find a judge who understands all this? Not in this world, I guess. So, very problem there. And then there's a problem with liability. Who is liable for abuse of the cryptographic systems which you bought to protect yourself and then found out they don't, but they're used to hack into your computer, like what some certain people expect that might actually be a problem with some of the, this kind of TPM and crap. Who's liable for insecure crypto systems? About insecure infrastructure, like the computer's operating system browsers that you use together with your Personalausweis. What about people actually hashing up things like DigiNotar? How much of a legal handle do you have to actually deal with them? What about malware on your computers? Today it's very, very easy. You do some really stupid stuff with your computer. Make sure you turn off the personal firewall on Windows. Use Windows for that if you're smart. And you do whatever you want, and by the time police shows up, you can be sure, you can say, that wasn't me. And they take your computer and find yourself in so many botnets, they decide this is probably a new world record. And you can't be responsible for that because it wasn't you, you can say, right? What about loss of service because crypto screws up? Who will pay for that? And worst of all, what about the victims of people who, or companies that say, okay, yeah, we've sold you this stuff and it doesn't work, but, well, not our problem because, well, we're out of business. And none of these things have been properly taken care of so far. None of them. It's all your very own problem to make sure that these things don't hit you as hard as they might actually could if you don't take care of them. And then international things, they're also nice and ugly. There are restrictions on use of cryptography in a number of countries. There are import restrictions, there are export restrictions. There are these laws that you have to surrender your keys if you go across certain country crossings. What about if you use temporary keys, which are destroyed as soon as you power off your computer? You have a problem there. What about if you actually overwrite your computer hard disk with random data? Very, very stupid idea. Sir, we want that key. Sorry, but that's random data. We want that key. Not a very nice... In UK it means 2 months in kind of a funny hotel, and then they send you back home, right? And I don't want to know what happens in some other countries. And then, of course, there's a problem, how about international law enforcement, which is actually necessary. And it's not like all cops are evil or something like that. They're just doing a job, and a necessary job, one way or another. And they have to work at an international scale in some cases. And that's where things get really ugly. Yeah, and then there's the political layer, like our German dream team, Schäuble von der Leyen. So crypto can be abused for terrorism, child pornography, distribution of pirated data, be it software or music or movies or whatever favorite scare word you may want. What about that? How do we handle that? Oh, outlaw crypto. Yeah, all problems solved. Wouldn't be surprised if people try that sort of stunt again every once in a while. Generally, when it comes to the internet, the political focus is on cost reduction, which isn't bad, but cost reduction at our risk, and that's bad. I have to do things with a computer, which might even actually have to run Windows for text declarations, like value-added text declarations. Sometimes you had to use Windows for that. We have. Sorry? Oh, was that outside? Okay, sorry. I don't see very much with that stupid light over there, so. We have project contractors who promise all sorts of things, despite they know that they can't properly deal with it. We have this problem with key escrow, with mandatory legally enforced key escrow. We have politically controlled backdoors, allegedly, in some random number generators or whatever, right? We have international espionage, and I've been dealing with customers who had problems with that. Didn't ask about the details because it wasn't any of my business, but they obviously had been hit hard. These things happen. Okay, what does it mean? Yeah, crypto is important, it's very useful, very, very helpful, but it doesn't solve all the problems in the world. It introduces a number of extra problems, which is what I hopefully showed. Now, in case you want to know a bit more about this, I've got a couple rather unusual book recommendations. First one, Neil Stevens' Cryptonomicon. It's a novel. It has lots of funny crypto stuff in there. Very nice reading. Cool stuff. He's writing cool stuff anyway, but this book is crazy. He's done some real good research on crypto. Simon Singh, he's written a book, German Teil ist Geheime Botschaften. My father actually read it, and he was a medical doctor. He loved it. It's about, World War II and breaking the enigma, and things before and things after. Very nicely written. If you want, you can find a number of sections there that actually go into the algorithmic details. Very nice reading. Another one has nothing to do with crypto, has nothing to do with computers, nothing, but the way how science work and engineering and lots of other things as well. Thomas Kuhn, Structure of Scientific Revolutions, very nice. That's where I learned about things will use whatever they have as long as you don't give them an alternative and these sorts of things. Ross Anderson, book Security Engineering. He's been writing about tamper-resistant things and all sorts of stuff. Very nice reading. You can actually get that on the internet for free, legally. And when it actually comes to cryptography, my standard book still is Bruce Schneier's Applied Cryptography, but it's a bit outdated, so he's written newer stuff. Okay. In case you have questions, we still might have time for a question or two before the next crowd comes in. Not really? Okay. So we'll do questions outside. Otherwise, you can reach me there. And if you want to see some stuff on IPv6 instead, go to the video blog. There are a couple episodes there on IPv6. Okay, so much for that for today.
Right, thanks a lot, Benedict, for that part. Yeah, as told, questions will be answered outside. Okay. And those who are leaving, please be so kind to take your trash with you. I've seen and also unfortunately heard quite a few empty bottles here, so yeah, take them outside, okay? Thanks.